Did you know that Puerto Rico's Act 2022, also known as Act 60, is not just for the crypto bros and the uber wealthy? Real estate investors, digital nomads, young entrepreneurs, and small businesses making as little as $60K a year are benefiting enormously from Puerto Rico's incentives. So you aspiring investors and wealth seekers out there should know how it works and why it matters.
Thanks for stopping by our little corner of the internet, y'all. I'm Travis.
Hi, my name is Maiki, and we are Coupled Investments. We've worked in real estate for 10 years at established real estate companies, and we invest on our own. We show beginners how to get started in real estate and the strategies and tools we've successfully used across diverse real estate markets in the US and now Puerto Rico, so you can build wealth beyond borders too. In this video, we're going to talk about what Puerto Rico's Act 2022 that has all been consolidated into Act 60 is about, and we're going to talk about why entrepreneurs are flocking to Puerto Rico for it and why it's become so polarized. We have several approved Act 60 incentives, including export services, young entrepreneurs, and tourism incentives, and we're using them successfully. Today we're going to break down 9 myths about the export services and individual investors incentives to start, including some of the surprising myths that are driving really intense debates in the media.
Let's think about what governments everywhere do when they want to attract people, attract businesses, or encourage economic activity. They have a couple of things they can do. They can make it easier for people and businesses to move, or make it financially attractive through things like subsidies and tax incentives. In a global world, there's an intensifying competition for people and enterprises. Places that urgently need the population and economic growth might do all of the above.
So as some background, Puerto Rico has seen huge population loss until recently and a number of economic challenges. So like many other places, it's using the levers that it has to change the course of its economy. Back in the early 2010s, Puerto Rico used its special status within the US to create programs and incentives that would attract people and businesses to the island to create jobs. These programs fundamentally leverage one of Puerto Rico's special agreements with the US, which is that PR residents do not pay federal taxes on income they earn in Puerto Rico. They only pay tax in Puerto Rico. This is the foundation that gives Puerto Rico crazy latitude in terms of how they can incentivize people and businesses to choose to move to Puerto Rico.
The 2 most popular programs are Act 20, the Export Services Act, and Act 22, the Individual Investors Act. People often conflate the two, but you can start to think about Act 20 as for businesses and Act 22 for individuals. Since 2019, these 2 acts now fall under what is called Act 60. We'll share what changed the implementation of Act 60 shortly. What's Act 20, currently known as the Export Services Act, all about? First of all, taxes on your business income are much lower, like much lower. With Act 20, your business's tax rate can drop to just 4%. That's way lower than what most companies pay. The second part, for people who establish an export services business and become a resident of Puerto Rico, is that there's no taxes paid on dividend income, which means if you get a distribution to yourself as an owner of one of these businesses, or if you have any fellow investors who are also co-owners in this business and they receive a distribution, it is taxed at 0%. The second part, for people who establish an export services business and become a resident of Puerto Rico, is that there are no taxes on dividend payments. If you live in Puerto Rico and own a business here, you won't pay any taxes on the dividends you get from your company.
Okay, so those are the rules, but how does it work exactly? Let's start with your business. You incorporate a company in Puerto Rico that provides a service. This could be anything from consulting to IT services or even telemedicine. There are requirements on who your business serves. Your services should be for people outside of Puerto Rico. So if you're helping clients anywhere else in the world, you're on the right track. In short, what does it take to qualify? As long as your business is about providing services to folks outside of Puerto Rico, you can qualify for the 4% tax rate.
Here are some examples of businesses that would qualify. Online sellers, do you know anyone who sells stuff online? They can use Act 20 as well. By setting up a company in Puerto Rico for marketing their products, they can get these tax benefits.
Manufacturers are another example. Even if your main business isn't about services, you can still benefit. If you're building toy bears for customers in the mainland US or Europe, for example, you can qualify.
Another example of what would qualify for expert services is back office operations. Some people use their Puerto Rican company to manage back office tasks like accounting, payroll, etc. and so forth. So their main business is operating elsewhere while those tasks are being handled in Puerto Rico.
So why is this a big deal? If you're a small business, an entrepreneur just starting out, you can see a huge savings in one of your biggest expenses. Normally, businesses in the US pay a lot more in taxes. But with your company in Puerto Rico, you only pay 4% in corporate tax and nothing on dividends. That's a pretty big savings compared to the usual taxes that you would pay in the mainland US. So Act 20 is this amazing opportunity for businesses, independent contractors, entrepreneurs to save on that expense. But you have to set things up the right way in Puerto Rico. Once you do that, it's a pretty hard deal to beat.
Let's get into the 9 myths and misconceptions. Myth number 9 is that Act 20 is only for existing businesses. First, remember that there are business incentives and individual incentives. What was formerly Act 20 is for a business or independent contractor providing services outside of Puerto Rico. Most people don't realize that Act 20 covers a wide range of work. It's not for regular W-2 employees, but if you're working remotely, this is where it gets exciting. With so many people working from home these days, why not switch to being an independent contractor? If you're in Puerto Rico, you're basically exporting your services to the world. In fact, small independent contractors not only count, they can do really well with the simpler requirements. This is because they don't have to spend countless hours tracking deductions. If you're an independent contractor or can transition to one in your job, you can qualify. Whether you're into digital writing, marketing, telemedicine, consulting, design, coding, or any job you can do from anywhere, Act 20 is something you should definitely check out. If you're curious about what has changed in the rules, the biggest update happened in 2019. The new incentives code that was consolidated under Act 60 added a small twist to Act 20, the Export Services Act, in 2019. I'll briefly mention the major changes, and you can sign up for the PR updates in our newsletter if you want to stay up to date on what's changing. There's now an employment requirement for bigger businesses. If your Act 20 company makes over $3 million a year, you'll need to hire at least one full-time employee from Puerto Rico. If your business earns less than $3 million, you're not impacted. There's no requirement to hire anyone else. You can keep running your business just as you are.
Let's talk about myth 8, which is that Act 20 is only for extremely profitable businesses. This couldn't be further from the truth. Do you want to know who is here setting up export service businesses? There are creatives, event coordinators, call centers, 2-person marketing teams, and a whole host of new entrepreneurs and small businesses who are benefiting from this program. There are many entrepreneurship and business options. You can start a range of businesses here that qualify for Act 20 export services. Whether you're a big business or a solo freelancer, even if you're making under 100K, you can benefit from the program. So there you go. There are regular people optimizing their businesses with these incentives.
Now it's time for myth number 7. Myth number 7 is that you have to live in Puerto Rico to operate an Act 20 company. This is a common misconception. Many people think that to take advantage of Act 20, you need to pack your bags and move to Puerto Rico. Here's the real deal. You don't necessarily have to live in Puerto Rico to operate an Act 20 company. The main requirement is that your business just needs to provide services to clients outside of Puerto Rico. But here's what to keep in mind. If you're not a resident, you'll miss out on some additional tax benefits like the dividend tax exemption. Also, if you're in the US, you might face the GILTI tax and US taxes on dividends. So while you can run your business from afar, being here in Puerto Rico has its perks. If you're not living in Puerto Rico, you might wonder if the Act 20 tax benefits are still worth looking into. Even for non-residents, the 4% corporate tax rate under Act 20 is a big win compared to higher tax rates elsewhere. While non-residents don't get the full spectrum of tax exemptions, the significantly lower corporate tax rate is still a major advantage for your new or existing business's bottom line. It's our value to be present and to contribute to the communities that we call home, so we made the choice to spend all of our time out here on the island. We hire locally and we support small business here.
Myth number 6 is an interesting one that always comes up in our conversations. People believe that the Act 20 benefits can be taken away on a whim by the Puerto Rican government. And I get it. The incentives can feel like a black box for people on the outside. The terms are a big unknown, and longevity is always a big concern for people considering the acts. They usually wonder, what if the Puerto Rican government doesn't keep its word? Here's why it might be okay, and why we think it's okay. Here's the thing, Puerto Rico really needs businesses and the taxes they bring in. The Act 20 decree is a binding contract with the Puerto Rican government that they're legally required to stick to. The term for the contract is 15 years. So even if the incentive regulations change, contracts are supposed to be honored and grandfathered in. In fact, I've heard that there's examples where the government tried to change the rules they had made with the companies on the island, but the court sided with the companies and said that the government had to honor their contracts. So there's some legal precedence for these types of contracts with the Puerto Rican government. At the end of the day, we can't control everything that happens with the Puerto Rican government, but having a binding contract was good enough for us.
Myth number 5, it's complicated and a big hassle to get, and it's not worth the time. How many hours are wasted by new entrepreneurs and small businesses trying to stay up to date with deductions and stressing about receipts for every business meal so that they can keep more of their income? Think about it. Saving on taxes is like getting a risk-free return on investment. Instead of risky ventures or getting mired in tax regulations, you're just keeping more of your own money. There are long-term benefits. Over time, having less friction, wasting less time, and saving on tax expenses can add up big time. Also, if you want even more strategies and tips like this, join our newsletter using the link in the description.
Okay, this one might burst some bubbles, but let's say it. Myth number 4. You'll have instant success and be living in luxury just by having an Act 60 company. I'm being facetious, but establishing an export services business is no silver bullet. there are challenges to managing a business that don't go away. At the end of the day, you will still have to do the work to make your business profitable and sustainable. There are also challenges to relocating and living in a new place if you do choose to also move here for maximum benefits. For us, the move was primarily a lifestyle change, and the entrepreneurship ecosystem here was a great added benefit. So to this point, we focused just on Act 20, the business side of the incentives. But there's another one, and this is the most contentious one. Just as a disclaimer, we do not have Act 22 decree, so we have less personal experience with this one. Though we both know many people who do, and in doing all the research on all of the Act 60 incentives, it of course comes up with all the experts that we talk to. Before we get into the myths around this act, let's remind folks what Act 22, which is also called the Individual Investors Act, is about.
The reason why this is significant for individuals is that Act 22 reduces your capital gains tax to zero. That's right, no taxes on your investment income. In the US, you might be paying up to 20% tax on dividends and capital gains, plus some extra taxes depending on your income. But in Puerto Rico, your future gains on stocks, bonds, and even crypto are tax-free. If you have any dividends, interest, or royalties from Puerto Rican sources, those are also tax-free. Here are the requirements and changes in the 2019 regulations you need to be aware of. It's more expensive to maintain your Act 22 status. Now, to qualify for Act 22, you need to donate $10,000 annually to official charities in Puerto Rico. That's up from $5,000. You also need to buy a house in Puerto Rico within 2 years and live in it, no renting. Fortunately, there's no minimum price for the house. There's also a higher filing fee. The cost to apply for Act 22 went up from $300 to $5,000. For this incentive, it's really important for you to maintain your status as a Puerto Rican resident, and it's pretty much a non-negotiable. We'll clarify what that means a little bit later.
This brings us to myth number 3. The application is so hard to get and you can't start to realize the benefits for years. That's the myth. You have 2 options. You can hire help or actually do it yourself. You can hire a lawyer to help with the paperwork, or you can do it yourself online through Puerto Rico's single business portal. We've done both. We've completed the entire application for 2 of the major Act 60 incentives so far. If you do go with a lawyer, it might cost you between $1,500 to $20,000. And in terms of processing time, hiring a lawyer doesn't necessarily expedite things. I've had applications completed far more accurately and faster than people who paid upwards of $20K for overextended lawyers. Puerto Rico might take 3 to 10 months to say yes to your application to any of these incentives, but they'll count your tax benefits from when you first applied.
Myth number 2, you can't leave or travel outside of Puerto Rico to keep the benefits. Once you get the green light, you have a year to move to Puerto Rico, or you'll have to start over with your application. To really get the best tax benefits, you need to become a true resident of Puerto Rico. To be a resident, you need to pass 3 tests. There's a personal presence test. You've got to spend enough time in Puerto Rico. This could mean being there for 183 days a year, or a total of 549 days over 3 years, with some other conditions. There's also the tax home test. Your main business activities should be in Puerto Rico. If you have an Act 20 company there, you're on the right track. Lastly, there's a closer connection test. This one's about showing Puerto Rico is really your home. Things like having your family there, owning a car, being a part of the community, even voting in Puerto Rico help prove this.
Finally, we've come to the number 1 myth that is really keeping people from a real strategy that can help them grow their wealth smarter. Myth number 1, Act 20, the Export Services Act, Act 22, the Individual Investors Act. There's a myth that this is only for crypto bros, day traders, and the super rich. This is really a tragic rumor because it's preventing young entrepreneurs, new business owners, and others from learning about how this might work for them. Sure, there are wealthy folks here in Puerto Rico, but there are also plenty of people making around $60,000 a year and loving life here. There are many veterans and retirees who are trying to make their income stretch into retirement that are also taking advantage of these tax incentives. So there you have it. Those are the things that you should know about both Act 20, the Export Services Act, and Act 22, the Individual Investors Act, and what myths you can ignore. If you found value in the information we shared today, you'll probably like this other video where we talk about 2 secret Act 60 tax incentives that no one is talking about. Thanks for tuning in.